Welcome back, folks. It's 4.5 minutes past 7 o'clock, and the question is asked on several occasions: is the political playing field level for women in Trinidad and Tobago? How can we make it better? Have we tried hard enough? Well, Opposition Senator Anita Haynes, she joins us to discuss exactly what it's like to be a woman in politics in Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to Morning Edition.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Senator, are you satisfied with the level of participation of women in the politics, the national politics of Trinidad and Tobago?
I think we've done well to improve the situation, but there's more to do. And I think this year's International Women's Day theme, Press for Progress, gives us this opportunity to discuss how we move forward in increasing the level of participation of women at all levels of decision making, but in politics.
I like the idea,
Yes.
and I think it's a laudable goal
Right.
to achieve. How would you say a greater participation of women in politics in Trinidad and Tobago will change the nature of politics in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay. Yeah, politics is about representation, right? So when you look at your representatives, you would like to see a reflection of the society. If you look at our representatives now, you don't see a reflection of the Trinidad and Tobago society. It is skewed largely masculine. And so when you open up the spaces at the decision-making tables, politics being one of the major ones, you create a space for national development that we probably don't currently have.
Now, you're an opposition senator.
I am, yes.
You were appointed by the UNC
Yes.
to represent their interests in the Senate. Does the UNC party as an entity
Yes.
advocate this particular view that there ought to be a greater level of women participating in national politics?
You can take a look at our national executive, the UNC NATEX, and you can see that we advocate, but not just women, but diversity across the board. And that goes to the idea of representation. But our political leader is female. 2 of our deputy political leaders are female. A lot of the members of our national executive are female. And so what we're trying to do is create that space that more women should come and take your place at the table. And this, I think, is an important conversation, and it is something that the United National Congress advocates, and it's also something that the political leader herself did a lot of work in as the Prime Minister, including leading a side event at the UNG in 2011 or 2012 that spoke to women's political participation globally, and that included persons like Hillary Clinton, Michelle Bachelet, Helen Clark, and it was a high-level discussion on how we can improve the global situation. And she took that and she set about doing it here in Trinidad and Tobago, and 1 on the national level, including people like myself in the Senate, and then 2 on the party level by including our national executive and making sure it is a reflection of society.
Now, you sit in the Senate, and I'm sure that you would have paid attention, particularly to the quality of representation that may come from female representatives and female MPs
Right.
In the lower house in particular. Is there a fundamental difference between what you see the female MPs doing as member of parliament, representing the interests of their constituencies,
Right.
as opposed to what their male counterparts may do?
I think that conversation is a little bit different. You see, when you talk about male and female, you're talking when we talk about female representation, you look at the numbers, you do want to see the cross-section of society. When you talk about an individual's representation, then you have to take into consideration that person, right? So I'm a person, yes, I'm a woman, but I'm also a person. A lot of what I may do can come down to personality traits. So you know, I think a lot of people take this discourse into different avenues. Well, what's the difference between men and women, or what's the difference between having more women? Again, it is about representation. When our secondary school and primary school girls look on at the political playing field, do you feel like it's a welcoming space for you? Do you feel that this is something that you can get involved in? Is it a space that girls are encouraged to get into? I don't think we've gotten to that point. Largely, we're not told you could be prime minister. We're on the verge of having our first female president, and I still don't think that it's encouraged or it's a space that is nurtured for girls to aspire to be.
But in terms of that socialization
Yeah.
and encouraging girls to be leaders at that national level,
Yeah.
because I mean, we have many females that lead community groups,
Yes.
that are leaders in many various aspects in religion,
Exactly,
and
yeah.
so on. But the issue then becomes, well, who's going to be responsible for encouraging girls
All of us.
to become greater leaders, better leaders,
All
to
of
be,
us.
to take the mantle of leadership,
Yeah.
and run with it? I mean,
The answer really is all of us. It is all of our responsibility. And again,
and you know, when you say all of us, that it usually means none of us, because nobody.
No, but then, exactly. I mean, I've sat at tables where we've discussed women's political participation, and you've had people say, yes, we should have more women in politics, and then so you ask them, well, are you willing to join? And it's be like, no, it's not for me. And then you have a lot of considerations, because again, the political field, almost anywhere, but in Trinidad in particular, can get very difficult and nasty at times, and the kinds of attacks that you may see leveled against people, it's a disincentive to entering the
For
field.
anyone.
For anybody, yes. But again, in the way our society is set up, you tend to want to shield your women and girls from this and be like, do you really want to get involved in that? Is that something you want to do? And so you create these maybe unintentional barriers. And so when we talk about the glass ceiling, it's not just a physical, but there are barriers to entry that we see all the time.
I wonder if you as you look across the political landscape and in the context of where our society is, where the economy is, do you think that effectively women will bring something fundamentally different to the governance of Trinidad and Tobago?
Absolutely. I think that the more people that we get involved, the more people in general that we get involved in this process of national development can only take us forward. And that's a large part of what the UNC is doing. We've taken our advocacy from just being within political circles to this national circle of getting more people involved in the conversation. And that's women, that's young people, and across the board. And we can benefit from that. What we're saying is that by discouraging 50% of our population, by saying to women, this may not be the space for you, you may not want to do this, you are taking away a large amount of ideas that can be used for national development. And the more ideas we have, the better we can do.
You know, what's interesting about this is that, I mean, we are talking about it. You are an opposition center. We're talking about it from the point of view of a particular political party's perspective. The PNM, on the other hand, would have their internal women's group.
Yes.
Does the UNC possess a similar organ
Yes.
within the party
Yes, we do
that
have
addresses?
we do have a women's arm. We have a women's arm in the party, and what we try to do as well is nurture not just political advocacy, but building structures in a way that we can empower the women within our party, who can then go out and empower women who are outside of our party. And I mean, because we are a political institution, obviously it is with the hope of having people join our organization. But it is also from the perspective of national development and wanting a better society all around.
I mean, and that is certainly appreciated, but the question still remains, though, in the context of where we are as a nation, in the context of our economy and what we hope to achieve going forward.
Yes.
Do you think that ultimately a woman will have a different perspective? Like, say, a woman, a female Minister of Finance,
Right.
will have a different perspective in terms of fiscal adjustment,
Right.
structural adjustment, as opposed to
Well,
what a male
What I think we're
finance
trying
minister.
to do is blanket this conversation whether or not a woman, perhaps the right woman, absolutely, right? But what I'm saying is if we have more men than women to choose from, then you're going to end up with choice being a man. What we're trying to do is have equal amounts of women and men to choose from, and therefore you have the chance of getting the right person to do the job.
So
And
then, would you advocate that by law, our parliamentary representatives ought to have some level of gender balance?
so gender equity within
Gender equity within
by
the lower
law,
house, maybe?
Is it something that we absolutely need to legislate? That's definitely a discussion that we can have, right? This idea of quotas and stuff can get a little messy, but is it something that we should be thinking about and working actively towards as a society, that we don't need legislation to tell us that there should be equity? Then, yeah, I think those conversations should happen first. That we don't need legislation to know that we need to be equal.
Well, we were having an interesting discussion with some of our callers this morning, talking about gender income inequality and so on. From where you sit, do you think that that's an issue that must be addressed in Trinidad and Tobago?
Are you talking? I think that, well, I was listening to the callers, and then this idea of whether or not there is equity, I think clouds a large part of what has already been done. What we see today is a result of years of advocacy and years of progress of women working hard, of finding their space, where, or not finding their space, but rather creating a space for us. And so where I sit today is not just on my own doing, but because a way has been paved for me. And I think we should not cloud the discussion in that manner. We should be looking at, all right, we've done this much, and here we are. Now, how do we get to the next level? How do we see this kind of 50% and this equity? So you're talking about equal pay, and then I am talking about equal boardrooms and equal, and do we see that? When you look at the cross-section of leadership, are you seeing equal or equitable representation? And the answer is no.
Right, but even in the context of the appointment of boards to state enterprises, because we can definitely talk about the political dimension here.
Yes.
So the appointment to state boards, you're still not seeing that widespread participation of women on these state boards. So what do you think accounts for that? And
well, I think one, like I told you, there are even more soft barriers to entry, things that you may not have even thought about as a barrier to entry for women. So like you may be offered a board position, and then because of the way our society is structured, a lot of caregiving and the taking care of the home falls to women. So now that's a consideration that you have to have. Do I have the time and space to serve on a board, right? And these are decisions women have to make on a daily basis. Are we as a society enabling women to make the decision to enter the boardrooms? And that's the discussions that we are hoping to have, and the spaces that we're hoping to open. And like I said, it's not necessarily a legislative solution, but society as a whole deciding that equity is what we want to see and taking the steps to move towards that.
Because the other issue regarding legislation, and I can speak to you as a legislator yourself, I can speak to you on these matters with some level of confidence. Shouldn't we then creating the space to facilitate women to be greater, to engage in a greater level of participation at the board level? Shouldn't we have things like after-school care mandated? These are facilities and activities being funded by corporate entities to give their female employees, their female managers, their female board members the opportunity to be greater participants in a lot of these strategic decision making within these organizations. Shouldn't that then be legislated?
Again, these are things that we, and like I'm glad that you brought it up, because we should be looking, and I want to go back to the fact that as a society, have we agreed that equity is where we want to go? Having said yes to that, then do I have to, as a parliament, create a law to tell a corporation that you have to find a way to make women feel more a part of your organization? It shouldn't be that. That shouldn't be something that we... Because then that says that you have not agreed with the initial premise that this is something that we want to do. So we would have went wrong.
Some corporate entities may not share the view. Some corporate entities may not share the view.
And then we take the step back.
As a nation, if we agree that that is what ought to happen to create those spaces,
you want to create,
then we make it mandatory via legislation.
We can also look at the fact that the government is a major employer, right? And do we as a government in that regard look towards providing daycare facilities within the public sector?
Shouldn't we?
Right? I believe so. Have we had that discussion? No, because at some points people are still questioning whether or not there's equity. So we're trying to...
Well, bring it to the parliament and have it debated.
I intend to do these things, and we intend to do these things as a political party because we understand the fundamental issues surrounding it. And a large part of what we're doing here today and why things like International Women's Day or the week now why they're important is that these are discussions that you don't often think about when you think about the political landscape or the executive landscape. Are you thinking about things like childcare? Probably not, but now you are. So,
Now you are. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you.
It's great having you here, Senator
nice being
Haynes,
here.
Opposition Senator. And we're talking about International Women's Day and the important aspects of ensuring a greater participation of women in our society from a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, etc., etc. Thank you so much. All right, folks, we still have more to talk about. There's this table tennis issue that still lingers out there. So we're going to take a break and come right back with that.